Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. We are here at Benson Airport, which is where we left off at the end of the last video. And before I get into today's fun, I want to give everyone who watched my last video a shout out. I really appreciate you guys. And a special shout out to everyone that liked and subscribed. I was pleasantly surprised by the reception. As a guy with, no social media presence as of now, I was not expecting to get the number of likes and views and subscriptions that I did. And I really appreciate it. To be honest, if you enjoyed the last video, there is way better stuff to come. So hope you guys stick around and keep watching.
But everything's good till it goes bad. And you won't tell all the people about the fun you used to have. It hurts when it don't last. No easy way saying bye. So I'ma spread my wings, head for the sky. And I fly so low. 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 And I fly so low.
Today's video is going to be a ground session. So as you can see, I'm in my Jeep, and the reason for that is that my airplane is currently down for an annual inspection, which is normal, standard maintenance for airplanes. It's just part of the game. They need a lot of maintenance and a lot of inspections to make sure that they continue to be safe to fly. So it shouldn't take too long. I'm hoping it'll be back up in a week or two. And in the meantime, we're going to talk about ground knowledge, which is not as exciting as the flying part. No question about that. But many would say it's more important. A good pilot with stick and rudder skills is going to be able to handle a lot of bad situations. A good pilot with a lot of knowledge is going to see those bad situations coming and be able to avoid them. So that's the value in just, greater understanding of your environment and what could happen on any given flight. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, I have a personal announcement, which is really cool. I'm very happy about it, and I'm excited to show it to you guys. My name came up on a hangar waiting list, and I only had to wait a few months for that to happen. Sometimes people wait years before they get a phone call that a hangar is available. And it's here at Benson Airport, which is fantastic because I already work out of here, so it could not be more convenient. So hang on just a second, and I'm going to show it to you guys. Be back in a sec.
I'm learning to fly, but I ain't got wings. Coming down.
So what we got here is a pretty standard T hangar. What's great about this one is a couple things. One is it's bigger than your average T hangar. So what I was able to do is actually set up kind of a classroom / office area plus a little bit of a shop area for myself. I got a little mini fridge full of cold drinks for those hot summer days, a little hammock chair for when I got downtime and some time to relax. It fits a lot of needs at the same time. We can do ground instruction over here. We can even do check rides in here. It's got everything that would be necessary for the oil portion of a check ride. It's also insulated, which here in Southern Arizona, it gets hot in the summer, and that is already starting, even though it's only late March. So that is gonna be invaluable, that insulation, just to keep things bearable. And over here is my classroom. Like I said, pretty bare bones. More is coming for sure as far as that goes, but got a desk, got plenty of reference materials, got a big whiteboard, and up on that whiteboard is going to be the main material for today's video. So hang on just a second and I will be back to talk about it. As you can see behind me, what we have is a progression of checklists. Now these checklists are going to be the basic things that are going to help anyone ensure that they are conducting a legal, safe, and adequately planned flight. So it all starts from the PAVE checklist that's up there on the left side of your screen. PAVE, of course, P-A-V-E, which stands for Pilot, Aircraft, Environment, and External Factors. Then each one breaks down into sub-checklists and sub-acronyms. Very common thing in aviation. We see a lot of that. So let's get into it. Pilot breaks down into the I'm Safe checklist. So this is a checklist that the pilot will be conducting on themselves. And it's basically a self-check to determine, hey, am I in a good state of mind, state of health, and just am I generally in a good place to fly an airplane today. So it breaks down into illness, medications, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotional factors. So we'll go through that real quick. Most of the stuff's pretty self-explanatory. Don't fly if you're sick. Definitely don't fly if you've been drinking alcohol. There are some rules related to that one. 8 hours bottle to throttle is a common saying. You need to have 8 hours in between your last drink and when you go to take the controls of an aircraft, and your blood alcohol level needs to be below 0.04. That is the limit for aviation. Now, if you are ever in a situation where you are asking yourself, am I below 0.04? just don't do it. Don't play that game. It's not worth it, okay? Give yourself more time, take a nap, better yet, just fly the next day. There's nothing wrong with drinking a little alcohol here and there. There's a lot wrong with drinking and then flying an airplane. So err well on the side of caution when it comes to something like that. Medications is an interesting one. So a lot of them are probably pretty obvious, right? Any sort of prescription painkillers, anything that's gonna make you drowsy, anything that's gonna slow your reaction time. If you ever have any questions or you're unclear on which medications are allowed, if you go to the FAA website, you will find a list of medications that are prohibited, a list that are allowed, and then a list that are conditionally allowed. So it kind of depends on how often you're taking it, what your dosage is. You can find more of that online, and I encourage you to do so. Stress and fatigue, these are two normal parts of everyday life. What you need to be concerned about here is excessive amounts. So if you're excessively stressed, you don't want to put yourself in a position like flying an airplane, which is an inherently stressful environment in and of itself. So compounding that stress lead to a pretty bad outcome potentially. Be smart, err on the side of caution as always. And then the last one is emotions. So that would be something like you've experienced a personal tragedy or some sort of difficult thing that's going on in your life outside of anything to do with aviation. These things happen, right? Life sometimes kicks us in the teeth and there's no shame in it. Only thing we want to say here is if you are feeling excessively emotional for whatever reason, you might want to think twice about flying. If you can go through that checklist and you can honestly tell yourself, okay, none of these things are applying to me today, then you should be good. And on top of that, all you're gonna need is your pilot license, your medical certificate, and a government issued photo ID. So those last three things you need to have on you and you need to be able to produce them if asked. So moving on, A for aircraft, we've got two acronyms for aircraft. We've got Aviate and we've got Sparrow. And actually I'll pop over here so that's a little bit easier for everyone to see. So the first checklist is going to be your required inspections. There are several. And the first one, of course, is your annual. Every 12 calendar months, airplane needs to have an annual inspection signed off by an inspection authorized mechanic. It's very thorough, and they'll pretty much catch any major problems in an annual. Second one is VOR. So a VOR is a navigation device that is not in every airplane, but you will find it in most. And the interval for that is it has to be inspected and found to be within required margin of error within 30 days of an IFR flight. Now, if you're flying VFR, you do not have to have your VORs inspected. However, you still should, right? You want all your equipment on your airplane to be reading correctly. You never know when you might be in a situation where you might need to use it. So just make sure it's working. It's pretty easy to do. I'll go more into that in a subsequent video. The I there is actually a 1 and it stands for 100 hour. Now 100 hour inspection, that's gonna be TAC time, operation time. And it is only gonna be necessary if you are flying or using this airplane for compensation or hire. If you are not engaging in commercial activity, you do not need to do an 100-hour inspection. You can if you want, it's just not legally required. The second A is sort of a reminder. It's altimeter, but it's really your whole pitot-static system. Now, similar to VOR, this is only required if you are flying IFR. However, even if you're flying VFR, you should do it. It's only every 2 years. It usually is pretty quick and inexpensive. And you just want your instruments to be telling you the truth, right? You don't want to be relying on inaccurate readings from important instruments. Altimeter, your vertical speed indicator, and your airspeed indicator are three of the most important instruments that you have, and you want them to be telling you the truth. So 24 calendar months for that. The next one is T for transponder, which is also 24 calendar months. Now that one, those two are typically done together. It's usually a package deal. They got the same time interval, so it's usually convenient to have them done at the same time. And then the last one for required inspections is E for ELT. Now it's your emergency locator transmitter. And that is what is going to save your life potentially if you are in an incident where you need to make a forced landing or you have some other emergency. That thing is going to broadcast a signal that can be picked up by ATC and any relevant authorities that might be coming to search for you. So 12 calendar months on that one, and it's typically done at the same time as the annual. If all those things are in order and well inside your time frame, then we'll move on to your required documents. Now, the acronym for that is SPARROW, and let's go through it. So the S is for STCs. That stands for Supplemental Type Certificate, and that is a major modification to your plane. Could be some part of the airframe, it could be the engine, could be the panel. If it's a significant modification, you probably need an STC for it. They're pretty heavily regulated by the FAA, and what you need to have as far as documentation is a sheet. It's usually a single sheet of paper that says, this is the this is the modification that was done, this is where it was performed, and we certify that it's been done up to FAA standards. So you have to have that in your plane, ready to be produced if necessary. P is for placards. Now, placards are usually found on your panel, but they can be found in other places. And what they generally are is kind of reminders of operating limitations. So you might have some about not exceeding a certain speed in a certain configuration. You might have some about weight distribution. There's usually going to be one about whether or not the plane is certified for aerobatic maneuvers or spins. All of those need to be present, and you can find the necessary ones in your POH. That stands for Pilot Operating Handbook. All planes come with them, and that needs to be in your plane at all times as well, the POH. But they'll have all the placards listed there. Now the first R is registration. That one's very simple. It's exactly the same as what you probably have in your car. It's just a piece of paper from the state that says you own this vehicle. Last 7 years needs to be in your plane. And the second R is conditional. So that one is your radio operator license. Now you only need that one if you are traveling over an international border. If you're staying in the States, it is not necessary. Now it's also very easy to get. If you want to get one, if you want to travel, internationally in yourself, you just need to go to the FAA website. There's a little form to fill out. There's a fee. It's $35 last I checked, and it's a one-time thing, and now you have it, and you're good to go on that. The last two here for required documents are operating limitations and weight and balance. So both of these are going to be specific chapters in your POH, and you should be familiar with them. And the reason for that is they're going to describe the performance that you can expect to see from your plane in terms of takeoff distance, climb rate, cruising speed. And if you're not seeing that listed book performance, that's usually indicative of a problem. And that's the kind of thing that you want to get taken care of as quickly as you can. If you're not seeing book performance and you've made sure that you're actually looking at it and you have the right conditions plugged in there, you need to get that checked out immediately. That can be a big problem. So if you have all of that, your aircraft is ready to go. So we can move on to V for environment. The checklist for that is NW Craft right here in orange. That's pretty much flight planning. Pretty much a flight planning checklist. Going through that, and it's for NOTAMs. NOTAMs are notices to airmen. Those are announcements that are disseminated by an airport or an FAA office or ATC, and they can cover a wide range of circumstances. You can have a NOTAM for severe weather, you could have a NOTAM for a runway closure or taxiway closure. You might have a NOTAM if there's construction somewhere in the vicinity of an airport, and maybe they have like a big crane or something that you need to be aware of if you're flying in and out of there. Could cover a lot of things, so it's important to get those. Generally speaking, any weather reporting service for any given airport is also going to include NOTAMs. So they're easy to get, they're easy to find, and they could be very relevant to you. So definitely don't skip that. W for weather. Now, weather is a huge topic. I'm not going to get very far into it today. That's going to be a subsequent video and probably a pretty long one. But what you need to do for your flight planning is, at a bare minimum, get weather reports and forecasts for your airport of origin, your destination, and your en route airspace. And you just really, more than anything, need to make sure that the conditions are going to be acceptable for you, for your level of training, and for your aircraft, right? You got to look at, cloud conditions. Is this going to be a VFR flight? You can look at wind speed. If it's, really high winds, maybe that's something you don't want to fly in. Potential for severe turbulence if the wind is, strong enough. And lastly, the absolute bare minimum thing that you should know is your density altitude. That's going to affect the performance of your plane across all phases of flight. And the higher it is, the less performance you're going to see. So definitely make sure that you know what the density altitude is where you're taking off, where you're landing. Okay? Like I said, a lot more to talk about there, but that's where I'm going to leave it for now. The K is known ATC delays. That is typically only going to be relevant to large airports. Usually smaller airfields, they're not going to have published delays, delays that are significant enough that they need to make an announcement about it. As a private pilot or even a commercial pilot of smaller aircraft, you can fly into big airports. It's legal. I don't recommend it, and here's why. Those large airports are incredibly busy. The staff, especially in the towers and the approach and departure controllers, are overworked and underpaid. They are working on routing heavy commercial traffic, and you in your small, slow airplane you're going to be in the way, right? You're going to be an annoyance to them, and there's a good chance, you call them up and you request entry into the airspace. You want to land at like LAX, let's say. They're going to tell you to hold, and you might be holding for like a couple of hours before they can fit you in. So like I said, it is something you can do, but unless you have a really, really compelling reason that you need to use that airport, I would say find another one. You got all kinds of options inside that, under the Bravo shelf. There's going to be smaller airports that you can use. They're going to be better options for you. Moving on to runways. So runways, of course, very important. Not only the length to ensure that you have adequate room to take off and land, but also the material. Most people are familiar with concrete and asphalt runways, right? Hard surfaces. But there are plenty of other types of runways out there. Sometimes they're nothing more than a dirt strip. Could be gravel, could be grass, even ice. There are actually ice runways out there, not very many, and they're only going to be in places where it's cold and snowy and icy pretty much year round. But definitely look ahead and make sure that the runway you're planning on using is appropriate for the type of plane that you have. And then of course, you want to check the field elevation. That's going to affect your density altitude and the performance of your plane. So definitely check those three things at a minimum. A is for alternate. Alternates are not legally required for VFR flying. However, it is always a good idea to have some knowledge and understanding of your surroundings, including airports in and around the vicinity of where you're planning on flying into, and also airports en route. Just in case something happens, for some reason you can't land at the airport that you planned on landing at, you need to have some idea of what your options are. So you don't need an officially filed alternate, but keep in mind what are some other options that you may have in the event of something unexpected. Which brings me to fuel. Now, this is hard to believe, but it's very common when you look at aviation incident reports, very common to see fuel exhaustion as the primary cause. People run out of gas, their plane can't fly anymore, and now they gotta try and put it down in a field or on a street, if they're lucky and there's something like that available. And it's just not, it's just something that should never happen. It's really not that hard to do the math, figure out how much fuel that you need, and then add a safety margin, a cushion on top of that. For daytime VFR, the legally required minimum is 30 minutes on top of your planned fuel needs. And then for nighttime VFR, it's gonna be 45 minutes. Honestly, if you are planning any sort of cross country, I would recommend having significantly more than either of those. Unless you're bumping into your max takeoff weight and you just literally can't have more fuel on board, it's never a bad idea to have a nice big cushion as far as fuel goes. And then the last one there is takeoff and landing distances. So that's going to relate to your operating limitations, your weight and balance, and your runway links, which are things that we've already talked about. But you need to take those things and you need to correlate them into, okay, based on the conditions, based on my airplane, POH performance tables are telling me that this is how much runway I need to take off. And then just confirm that you have that length plus a generous safety margin. For a smaller airplane, it's usually not too much of a concern. Most airfields have plenty of runway for small aircraft, but not all of them. So definitely make sure you're checking that. Don't overlook it. Can be a pretty big problem if you find yourself in a situation where you are not prepared. All right, so like I said, that's just like a general flight planning acronym, things that you absolutely need to be aware of and plan for. The last part here is external pressure, over here on the bottom, and I'll move over here so that's a little easier to see. Now, external pressures is, it's a situation where, let's say you are planning a vacation or you've had it planned for a while, going with friends, going with family, maybe even a business situation where you're flying up to catch an important meeting or do a presentation. Whatever the case may be, you have pressure on you to complete this flight that is something that is above and beyond normal flying consideration. And sometimes you can feel pretty significant pressure from friends and family, from business. We don't want to let those people down. However, and I'm going to get a little serious here, as pilot in command of an aircraft, it is your responsibility to adequately plan, to take any sort of potential hazards or unsafe situations very seriously. And if the situation calls for it, it is your job to disappoint those people. And many incident reports have primary causes of pilot error where they were with their friends, they were with their family, they flew into a situation that they weren't ready for, or their plane was not equipped to handle, and there was a tragic outcome. You hate to see it, right? You really do. It's terrible. It's so preventable. One of the biggest responsibilities of being a pilot is knowing when to say, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to fly into these conditions. We're not going to fly overweight just because you guys brought too much baggage. We're not going to do it. You got to have that level of integrity to maintain basic safety rules and requirements, because the outcomes can be tragic. Most of the time, adequately planned and adequate regard taken for safety, flying is perfectly safe. But when you start ignoring those rules and you started caving to external pressures, that's when you potentially put yourself in a situation where people can die, and they do. These safety rules are not just people trying to make you follow the rules, they are, many of them, written in blood. So you need to take that seriously, and you need to understand that those are the stakes that you're potentially dealing with, and you need to take it as seriously as the situation demands. Okay, so that is all I wanted to cover for today. Like I said, this is kind of bare minimum stuff. This is something that you should be doing before every flight, ensuring that all of these steps have been taken and everything's been looked at and you don't see anything that looks risky or problematic. Now, keep in mind that these are the bare minimums. It's never a bad idea to go above and beyond as far as safety measures. In fact, I have right here in front of me, just randomly, a handheld radio that will also pick up VOR and ILS signals. This thing is very cool. This is something that I got because I often fly IFR in actual IMC. And I got to thinking, well, what if I lose my radio? Both of them. I actually have two in my plane, but what if I lose my radio? What am I gonna do? You know, there are obviously lost comm procedures, but if you can have a backup and you can have something that is going to be able to replace that in an emergency situation, that's better, right? That's better than, you know, having to go through the lost comms procedures. Not only can you communicate, but you can actually navigate an actual precision instrument approach using this. So this is just one example. There's plenty of other, you know, great products out there and contingencies that you might want to consider. Yeah, never a bad idea. You can never be too safe when it comes to flying. And also keep in mind that any commercial flight you've ever been on, they are doing this plus a whole lot more. Their standards are much higher, the rules and requirements are much more comprehensive, and that's why their safety record is so good. So learn from that, right? Take something away from that and apply it to your own life. Take everything that is legally required, add a little bit more on top of it. Don't be a statistic, right? Don't be another incident report where somebody did something that was easily preventable and they lost their life because of it. Okay, so I don't want to end on a morbid note like that. Far more often than not, flying is just awesome. It's fun, it's cool, but you need to make sure that the rules and the regulations and safety considerations are being followed before you have fun and enjoy, you know, this awesome thing that we can do. Okay, so that is it for today. Next week, or whenever my plane's back up and running, next video for the channel is going to be Sedona. It's going to be very cool. It's considered by many to be a bucket list airport, and for good reason. It's absolutely beautiful up there. The approach is stunning, visually stunning. Can be a little bit challenging due to the mountainous terrain, the wind currents. There's actually a little dip on one end of the runway. Not a big deal, just something you need to be aware of. And also the fact that typically, because of the prevailing winds over there, people will use one direction of the runway to take off and the other direction to land. So communication is very important. Understanding where other planes are, what their intentions are, and acting accordingly just adds a little bit of a aspect of additional challenge to it. But we'll be talking about that next time. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something today. Any questions or comments, please put them in there. I will answer you. And we will see you next time. Thank you for watching.